Welcome back to the Alts Podcast. I'm your host, Horacio Ruiz. We bring you industry leaders and creators to give their insights on the rapidly changing and exciting world of alternative assets. Opinions expressed on this podcast by the host and podcast guests are for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Podcast hosts and guests may maintain positions in the offerings discussed in this podcast. The intro song, Fishing for Pets, is written and composed by Alan Goldshire from his latest release, Live at the Lakeview Lounge. Thanks for joining me on the podcast. Today's guest is Chris Zhu. He's the founder of Mirror World, a metaverse ecosystem with artificial intelligence capacities that allows a character, an NFT, to learn from its interactions with its owner and gameplay situations. In the Mirror World ecosystem, characters can take what they learn from one game on the platform and apply it to another game within the Mirror World ecosystem. Think of taking an AI version of Luigi from Mario Bros. And putting him in a Sonic the Hedgehog game. That's what Mirror World is building. In this episode, we talk about why Chris is innovating the NFT space, how artificial intelligence works, and how future developers will be able to build on the open source ecosystem. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Chris. All right, guys, so we're really excited today. We have Chris Zhu. He's the founder of Mirror World. We haven't really had a guest talk to us at any point in time about, the metaverse and NFT gaming. So welcome on board, Chris. Really excited to learn more about Mirror World.
Yeah, my pleasure to be here.
There's so many questions because there's a lot going on there. We're talking about artificial intelligence using NFTs in gaming. And I know you've done this quite a few times, kind of explaining what Mirror World is. But if you can give us like a quick rundown of, how you are kind of changing the game a little bit with NFTs and gaming in the metaverse.
Yeah, glad to explain what Mirror World is. So on a very high level, Mirror World is essentially an AI-powered asset interoperability layer. What that means is that every single one of our NFTs is powered by a set of algorithms that allow them to have their own personality and behave according to that personality. So users can actually interact with their NFTs by either chatting to them or interacting them within our games. And through that, every interactivity is logged on chain. So we can track that changes of interaction between the different games or metaverses that we produce, as well as other developers produce in the process. We have a pretty mature toolkit to allow for blockchain gaming to actually be developed relatively quickly and for creators to create content within the ecosystem. And mirrors will be the NFTs that are used to enter all of these different metaverses. So one set of NFTs into different games and really focus on that asset interoperability that people really talk about. But we are trying to make that happen for the ecosystem.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. When you're talking about like interacting with your NFT or even talking to your NFT, like what does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah, so once you purchase one of our NFTs, what we really wanted to recreate is the sense of actually conversing with your companion, right? And NFTs in the metaverse are characters that could represent either your identity or a digital world's native identity. So that interaction really looks like something where you log into your wallet, and then you get access to actually a conversation with one of the digital assets that you own in a hosted service that's provided by us or by other developers. And like within the games, if your NFT has its own personality, then when you act, for example, if you wanted to run towards your NFT and your NFT is really shy, the personality traits that it has is a shy one, then they would just run away. So all of these behaviors are exemplified according to their personalities.
And I guess my question then would be, because now I'm getting like Her vibes. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, that film.
Yeah. I love that film.
For anyone that doesn't know the film, right? And you could help me too, Chris. The Joaquin Phoenix's character falls in love with this AI that he talks to, and it's really a companion. It becomes his best friend. So I'm kind of curious, like, what kind of personality traits do these NFTs have? Are they pre-programmed, or can they go in any sort of direction because of your like AI algorithms?
Right. So actually, all of the NFTs, the language models are not pre-programmed. So we only have one set of algorithms, and then you can have a ton of different conversations with the AI, depending on what the AI really generates itself. It's generative model where it can really go any direction, and we don't limit that. However, there are certain fine tuning that we've done to the model so that it resembles certain characters that our users can actually identify. For example, some of them talk like Elon Musk and the other ones like Kanye West. The reason why we didn't focus on, your virtual girlfriend, right? Her is essentially a virtual assistant that has emotional connectivity, was because we think that the technology one is just not so fit for having a companion at all times to kind of have that virtual assistant. And two, we really wanted users to actually be able to tune their personalities and really talk to the ones that they liked. And like, if you have a one set of virtual assistant for all of the users, then there's not as much customizable traits, right? So we chose these entertainment celebrities so that people can actually identify who they're talking to really easily and really have fun with it.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess I should even take a step back. The NFT gaming, let me kind of clarify what I'm saying here. The NFT gaming space has been criticized, right? Because in a lot of ways, the graphics or the technology is kind of taking us back a good 25 to 30 years. And so people are going crazy just because it's an NFT, but in reality, not much is different from what you could get from like a Super Nintendo or a Nintendo 64, my generation. So my question is, why build Mirror World, right? Why go in this direction?
Yeah. So when we talk about the NFT gaming issues that you just mentioned, I think one big problem was that people are not actually emphasizing the value of NFTs. So they were using, these games as a financial instrument to really drive, investors into the ecosystem and kind of have this spiral of users drive in hopes of like more users at the back, right? So I think that's definitely not a sustainable model where you're literally just waiting for a death spiral to happen because you're paying out, token emissions based on new entrants fees that they're paying. However, I think NFT does have its really, really special value of digital asset ownership identification in the metaverse or in the digital world, so we call it. So we wanted to focus on that layer of things. So once we thought about, what does a digital world that we would want to live in forever? For example, you would want to be in Ready Player One, right? Like spend a lot of time there in Oasis. So like games like that actually had quite a bit of, native characters that behave based on their own personalities in the virtual world. That really represents the worldview or the lore of that world. And that's the first thing that we wanted to actually create is characters that can actually represent their own digital world. And then two was that NFTs actually allow us to have authentication and verification of like who owns this asset. And that does not just happen in one single game, but in a myriad of games. So for example, in Web2, when you're playing Nintendo, right? Like let's say you played Mario on the Donkey Kong game for the first time as the plumber. And then you get to see that Mario in Odyssey, in platform jumping games, in the racing games, in every single game that Nintendo produces later on. But they're using the same set of assets. That's essentially interoperability, but the ownership requires a central authority, which is Nintendo, to actually benefit off of. But if it's a Web3 space and people are building on top of these AI-powered NFTs, these items and the assets can actually be interoperable through the different games without a central entity controlling all of the profits. So that's what we wanted to, change. And essentially, right now we can allow one of these NFTs to be going into three, for the first half of this year, there will be 3 games in our pipeline. And essentially they can go into any of the 3 games, whether it be 2D representation or 3D representation.
That's awesome. So, and that was kind of getting into my next question. Within the Mirror World ecosystem right now, you have 3 games, all kind of, with different roles that you can play, different missions. And so what you're saying is you could take your one character and you can play that one character in all 3 of those games.
Exactly. So like if you have your Pikachu can be riding a bike, or your Pikachu can be battling other Pokemons as well. And we wanted to recreate that sense of, having your digital companion, but at the same time, really have that asset be owned by you, by the users.
Here's a part that kind of blows my mind a little bit is, if your one character, if your one NFT can learn in one game, does it take the learnings, right, or whatever it's experienced from that one game, and then can it apply it into the second or third game, even if those games are different?
Yeah, I think that's actually the most interesting part is that we don't define the ways that your character learn. So we offer this mechanism where you can chat with your character, interact with it to level it up, what we call like intelligence level. The more you interact with it, the more time you spend with it. Essentially, we assume that the value of this asset is higher, right? And then throughout the gaming universe, the developers that are developing these games can use that data however they want. So they can essentially claim, a higher reward drop in one of the games because their asset has a higher intelligence level. Or if they wanted to play, into a racing game for faster track speed, maybe that their asset can also do that. So we don't limit the ways that the developers, utilize that data intelligence levels. For us, the first two games, there will be higher drop rates, there will be higher reward curves, as well as like a faster clearance speed if your mirror is a higher level than the other. So it's an upgradable smart contract that we've deployed on both Solana and Ethereum that actually correlates to in-game plays. So I think that's really cool that some of our developers have been able to connect all of those games with this interaction memory or log on the chain.
This learning, right? All of that learning that the NFT is doing through AI, it actually gets recorded on the blockchain?
So we don't record all of the chat histories that you have with your NFT or all of the interaction data. What we do, however, is we log the action itself. So let's say you are talking to your NFT 3 times a day. We log the change of that 3 times. And then once you talk to it for maybe 30 times, you level it up. And that level can be activated by paying a bit of gas fee. So in that moment, we are essentially logging that change on chain, but not necessarily all of that data users are providing to the system.
Got it. Okay. And so then once you're kind of upgrading your NFT, through these interactions and maybe through other rewards that you offer in the game, like you said, once it reaches a certain level, that does get recorded. So in essence, right, your NFT becomes more valuable as well, right? Because now you're kind of creating a more developed character. And I guess what I'm getting at is if someone wants to resell it, maybe a developed NFT is more valuable than one that hasn't been kind of interacted with as much.
Right. I think that's our assumption, but it's also for the market to decide, right? I think what we've seen so far is that some users are actually less prone to selling their NFTs because they've spent a lot of time interacting with it. Mm-hmm. They kind of grow this like really interesting dynamic where like the sell pressure on a certain collection is really low because the users that have been conversing with their character just actually grow fond of like the character itself. So I think there's 2 layers to it. Obviously, the value part a lot of users will be paying attention to, but on the other side, we really do want users to be able to develop an emotional connection with a certain character in the universe. Just like Web2 gaming, when you have spent a lot of time using a single character, that becomes kind of your main. And we think that stays true for Web3 games and actually augments that ownership.
Yeah, without a doubt, that is so true. As far as the big picture stuff here, and this is my kind of question. If you can explain it to the audience and myself, how does AI work, right? Because whenever someone mentions artificial intelligence, my mind kind of it goes to a blur. I just kind of think of this blur and maybe like some wires going around. But could you explain like how AI is actually incorporated into something like this?
Yeah. So our team has historically been in artificial intelligence, working on MMORPG and large-scale open-world games, where we wanted to utilize the technology to make these characters more interactive and really behave more like humans. And 2 routes that we focused on when we were developing the tech stack were 1, language. So we think that language is central to all human connection, right? And we wanted to recreate that reality feeling of like you having a conversation with someone. So that's the first aspect. And then the second aspect was behavior, where depends on the current situation and your kind of personality, you always react differently to the environment stimulus. So that part, we use deep reinforcement learning to simulate environments. And then we use algorithms like decision tree, like clusters of them to kind of recreate that decision-making process. And like how it actually gets done is that we have a database of, let's say, responses from certain users. And then we train that data set and then find the optimized algorithm to use in a certain scenario. For example, if we want to have a chatbot or like a conversational AI, and it needs to be deployed to everyone that owns an NFT, then it's on the mass scale, and people are talking to it on a daily basis. Then we might optimize for a smaller compute cost, where we deploy the algorithm on GPUs. Like the same GPUs that you are mining Bitcoin with can also be running one of our models. And then users will be able to call from these models and then just directly interact with their NFTs with a hosted service. However, that access itself is gated with the NFT. So the service is partially centralized. The interaction is logged on chain. The access is gated by the chain. So that's essentially how it runs.
You describing that, I'm kind of wondering, are there limits to how an owner can interact with their NFT? So, I'm thinking about like how you might ask, or one might ask Siri like a silly question, or maybe say a curse, and Siri very politely kind of changes the topic or says, "I don't understand what you're saying." Right? Are there certain barriers that certain users like might have when they're trying to, maybe curse at the NFT or make it behave a certain way that maybe isn't totally appropriate?
Yeah. So there are definitely like really sensitive topics that we have, censorship keywords for when it comes to, some of the more vulgar stuff. But at the same time, if you want to curse at some of the NFTs, like for example, we have a couple characters that resemble the personality of certain rappers. If you want to curse at them, obviously there should be no limit of them cursing back at you, right? So the AI really also depends on the personality that it's resembling.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. That interaction, and I'm kind of wondering how that's going to play out. Some people really might just love their character and be very polite to it, and I could see other people just kind of like going a different direction. But that also is kind of fascinating. So thank you for explaining kind of like the NFT world. Now I just kind of want to go and go through some bullet points. There are 11,000 NFTs. So there's at the moment you can have 11,000 different characters in the game. There's 3 games to play, and then the last thing I wanted to touch on was if you could touch on the soul chip, and I'm wondering if that was also what you were talking about in terms of like recording the data and having some stuff recorded on the blockchain.
Yeah, so the soul chip is essentially a gated access for other communities to encounter our service, right? So we wanted to actually be able to share this technology with a lot of other communities as well. We've had a selection process where the community applies for a soul chip, and we are able to combine a soul NFT with a collection of PFP or 3D characters that are minted by the community. So that allows for interactivity across different projects and for us to connect different projects to our ecosystem as well. And that's what a soul NFT is. And we've had, I think, over 1,700 users claim a soul NFT across different projects, maybe 15 or 20 different projects. And people have been, interacting and really experiencing that interactivity on chain.
Yeah, when I thought about your soul chip, I thought about, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Vitalik Buterin, he published a paper about soul-bound tokens, and basically talking about how that develops somebody's identity, Web3 identity, and it kind of records a lot of their interactions and kind of their trustworthiness as well. And so you're talking about kind of doing the same thing, right? Like this interoperability and having other users kind of interact with each other.
Yeah. So I think, soul-bound NFTs are non-transferable, and they're kind of a identification for example, like your college degree, your work experience, stuff like that. And I think that actually adds on to your virtual identity, your own virtual identity. And we wanted to mirror that with, soul NFTs, where we think that in the metaverse or in the digital world, there should not just be us like humans from reality, right? There should be native beings in the digital world. And how do you represent those identity is the issue that we are trying to solve, and the way that we are trying to develop it. So whether it be like the worldview that the digital beings are living in, or the interactions that they have with humans, or the personalities that they have within the worlds, those are all aspects of the ecosystem that we built.
Yeah, definitely. So we talked a little bit about the gameplay and about, the learning that's going involved, the AI that's involved, really, really interesting stuff. And then we've touched on it already, but I want to kind of delve in a little deeper on that and I'm quoting from the paper I read here. It says that you're going to have a token system, and under the shared token system, Mirror World will be open, autonomous, self-sustained, and asset interchangeable, which means that basically are you setting up the ecosystem, the video game platform or the playing platform, so that other people, other developers can come inside and kind of change or put in their own programs as well?
Exactly. So that's actually one of the key focus areas we have for the next couple months. So we've seen that there is a high demand for a structured toolkit, like SDK layer, contract SDK, authentication, and stuff like that for Web2 studios to enter into the Web3 space. At the same time, they are actually attracted by good content as well. So, for example, a worldview framework, a narrative framework that actually resonates with the Web3 audience. We thought that Mirrorworld is at the perfect intersection to actually combine those two aspects. And since we've developed a set of games that are interoperable, we have a framework that allows for new developers to join the system and build on top of it. And we actually focus on three sets of toolkits. One on and off chain tracking. So like all of the tokens that you have, the NFT tokens as well as the SPL tokens, they can be tracked within the game as well as like outside of the game on chain. And then two are essentially the contract SDKs, the mintable, upgradable, and tradable contracts that we've already developed for our ecosystem. And then three, obviously, is going to be the user experience side where you have payment systems and authentication. And that is really, really important for any game to succeed because you need a seamless flow where like the user is in their mind flow, right? And then they want to be able to experience that world with little to no disturbances. So once we have these toolkits consolidated in the ecosystem, we will be onboarding game developers more and more. And we've actually started to, discuss with some of the developers within the ecosystem, and they have been applying to, use the toolkits. And we will be incentivizing these developers with the tokens that we launch as well. So contrary to how Web2 is really gated the access of certain IPs, for example, Nintendo really hand selects and limits the number of developers that can actually utilize their assets to create and commercialize. We really want to be incentivizing that so that the nodes or the developers as nodes can really create on top of these existing frameworks.
If I can characterize it, right, and maybe I'm off base, and please correct me if I'm wrong here. So is this almost sort of like a Web3 decentralized version of, say, Roblox, where you have the ecosystem and then anybody within this ecosystem can go ahead and build their own world or game?
Yeah, so that's a little bit different because Roblox essentially creates an editor, a visual editor, to allow for UGC components. And I think Sandbox is doing something similar or from ideology perspective to Roblox. For our perspective, we think that Roblox actually limits too much creative kind of boundaries. For example, the visual style, the games that you can produce. There are certain types of games that are more suitable in Roblox and others maybe not as much. So we wanted our developers to actually have that freedom of using Unity or Unreal or Coco's Creator to create a game set they really like without the limitations of the visual and physics engines. However, we can actually make those games into Web3 games with the toolkits that we provide to them. So I think to answer your question, it's more like a decentralized, community-owned version of Nintendo rather than Roblox.
Yeah, that makes sense how diverse Nintendo can be. And then one of the last things, I guess, and you talked about a community-centered, community-owned. You did talk about the tokens, the tokenomics in Mirror World, and being able to have a governance, right? Starting a DAO. How does the DAO fit into this whole ecosystem?
Yeah, I think the DAO initially will be an approval process where there will be treasury board, product board, as well as governance boards to really pick the right developers to join in the ecosystem and grant, large scale projects different token incentives as well as development costs. So it's almost like a publishing platform where the DAO acts as one of the key holders. And then the DAO also has another component of the in-game governance where our players get to choose the reward systems, the game's next steps, and stuff like that. So I think there are two layers. One is out-game governance and one is in-game governance. And with in-game, we want to kind of reward not only the token holders, but also the NFT and token holders with a higher weighted governance power. And then in the out-game governance system, token is going to actually determine your weighted voting power. So those are the two layers of the DAO where you are developing, you're choosing the games to develop with the out-game governing. And then within the games, how the mechanisms, the reward systems are determined is also voted by the DAO.
The last question I kind of want to see, people have listened to the podcast. They're interested in learning more about the game. They want to try it out. They want to check it out. How can they go about doing that? First things first, I would imagine is, maybe do a little research, go on the website, and then maybe buy one of the NFTs. And then what else do you suggest?
Yeah. Obviously, first thing first, check out mirrorworld.fun. That's where we have all of the information regarding the worldview, the lore, the frameworks and the toolkits that we have, right? And then second step is going to happen, whether our marketplace or on a secondary market on Solana, where we are deploying our games right now. So definitely buy one of the passes, right? The NFTs act as one pass to the entire ecosystem. And then I think on the other side, we are welcoming developers from all sorts of industries to join our ecosystem. So do reach out in our socials, Discord, Twitter, and just let us know like what you guys are building and how you want to integrate with the ecosystem. And yeah, like I think those action steps would be your best way to get involved.
And quick question, when you buy that pass, when you buy one of the NFTs, are people able to play the game right now, or is that something that's kind of going to be debuted shortly?
Yeah. So we have done community alpha tests multiple times, and we are constantly improving the game with the community. So NFTs will be required pass to the ecosystem when it's public beta right now. The community can actually get access to the testable versions first already. And we will have the first 2 games rolled out before mid-July in the next coming months. So once that happens, the NFTs will be, the gated passes for the games.
Finally, Chris, where's the best way? Where are you active on social media so people can follow you?
Yeah, so join Mirror World on Twitter. And my personal account is Chris Zhu. I can probably leave a link somewhere, but definitely follow us on socials.
Chris, such a really cool project. Thank you for taking the time to talk about and explain it. Really kind of just a different thing here that you're building. So thank you for doing that for the NFT and the Metaverse space.
Yeah, thank you for having me as well. Love the conversation and really hope to see some of you within the community.
Absolutely. Well, take care, Chris, and best of luck with everything. We'll keep in touch.
All right. Thanks for having me again.
Chris describes what he's doing as building the Nintendo of the Metaverse. That's a lofty goal, but one that Chris and his team are fully capable of realizing. What he's doing is building in a way that sets it apart from everything that has gone wrong in the NFT Metaverse gaming system. Chris is building a product of the future and not sticking to Web2 conventions for ideas that require Web3 innovation. Thanks again to Chris for coming on the podcast, and a big thanks to you, as always, for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, let others know about it or leave a review or a comment. Until the next time, take care.